If I had the time and energy, I would write an essay about Columbine being blamed on video games, the military using video games to train and also recruit people, and the current, like the modern gamification of mass shootings. I feel like a picture is worth 1,000 words, so I'm putting this idea into a video. I'm sure smarter people have talked about this. Please help me find them. An empire dependent on numbing us to mass death inevitably leads to us being numb to mass death. There's also something about the white supremacy of it all. An empire is specifically built on the dehumanization of other human beings, which inevitably requires violence on a massive scale, because you cannot get away with that without actively destroying other human beings, but also somehow destroying part of your own humanness. And I think in particular, in a white supremacy, white people, particularly white cishet men, are inevitably like main character mode, somehow dehumanized to themselves in order to conform to this creation, this construction of whiteness, white man, and inevitably dehumanizing everyone around them as kind of a natural juxtaposition. When you lose that kind of motivation for basic empathy for people different than you, and instead of like minimizing the violence in games, I say this as someone who likes shooting games, but like figuring out if video games were having some influence, which, you know, I think was always kind of a scapegoat, but it feels like they steered into it in using video games to not only train people but also desensitize us, just like propaganda and other violent movies can desensitize us to violence. Playing a game where you're not a human and they're not a human, so the stakes of killing them aren't actually there, and there's reward for killing them. There's reward for the violence. The goal is the violence. That only further encourages this dichotomy I'm talking about. I think dichotomy is the right word. Wherein, under white supremacy, we get caught up in this forced binary, white and non-white, and this kind of automatic dehumanization that goes along with it. I didn't actually mean to write this essay, but when the medical marijuana hits, what was I talking about? There's this encouragement of dehumanization and violence on a massive scale, desensitization to violence in general, even interpersonal violence. And then you look at now with just the proliferation of the internet and social media and memes and meme culture and gamer culture, and like the last 5 years, 6 years of the pandemic, normalizing mass death, normalizing political violence, normalizing lives are expendable, and then particularly in the last 2 years, really normalizing mass death and mass violence, and in this kind of hyper-militaristic way with the live streamed genocide. I'm gonna tag a creator who made me think about this, CJ, who is more informed on these things. And if I were still in college and if I weren't fighting brain fog every day and fatigue most days and chronic pain every day, I might be able to write a more comprehensive, well-researched essay. But if you look at the alleged shooter in the Charlie Kirk assassination, it really seems like he just took the meme IRL. And I do think politics is involved. It's hard to tell at this point. There's a lot of, different narratives coming out, and it's hard to know what sources are reliable. But I think an empire built on the dehumanization of actual humans and the desensitization of mass violence and death, and in particular an empire that rewards violence, rewards mass violence and death. You can't be a billionaire without exploiting other human beings. And under capitalism, that literally means people dying. and the myriad other ways we in this society reward violence, cruelty, exploitation. The President of the United States is a racist, rapist, billionaire. In our last election, in every election, the option is between a fascist and a fascist. Every president has been a war criminal. Generational wealth in this country is more often than not tied to the exploitation of other human beings, but in particular through chattel slavery, an unprecedented form of slavery, like historically. We reward violence in this country, mass violence, in particular white violence. Not only do we reward white violence, we pretend it's not a thing, even though it's the biggest thing. It's what this country was built on. It's normalized, it's rewarded, and in the memer gamer age, it's playing out in the gamification of mass shootings, public shootings. And I mean, to what end? What would be my conclusion if I wrote this essay that I'm not going to write? One thing I have been taking from this conversation about this alleged shooter is that I need to learn more about the right and different factions of it. And I saw a really good video. I will try to find the creator and tag them as well, who kind of broke down some factions of the right and the difference between like destruction and creation, accelerationists, and whatever the opposite of that is. I don't know right now, and it's late, and I'm tired and running out of steam. Essentially, people who want to solve the problem in one of two ways. The problem being a general oversimplification of the world is bad. Accelerationists want to destroy. They think destruction is inevitable, they're accelerating it. And on the flip side, there are people who believe that things can be changed. And I am talking about on the right, but I think they exist both on the right and the left. In fact, I know they do. I am somebody who believes that things can be fixed. Things are really bad. And I acknowledge that it's a privilege and a luxury to feel that way, to some degree. But I do genuinely believe that things can be changed and things can be fixed. In particular because I am in community with people who are actively doing it, who are actually working on systems that could do it. It's gonna take time. Change always does on a mass scale. But in that vein, if we've gotten to the point where we're so desensitized to mass violence, interpersonal violence, political violence, and I say this as somebody who does believe that some deaths are justified, but like eugenics is never justified. Like there's killing a Nazi or a war criminal or a rapist, and then there's denying someone resources so they suffer and die quicker because they don't fit some constructed standard that doesn't actually exist to begin with. That's a tangent I would probably take out in the final edit of this essay that I'm not writing. The empire is burning and crumbling and gasping for breath, scrambling to stay alive as it dies. Things are accelerating, and there are people who are actively accelerating it. And if this is an empire built on the desensitization of violence and the dehumanization of human beings, the logical counter to that is to humanize each other. Strategic empathy, active empathy, purposeful, deliberate empathy. Intellectualize it. Learn how to do it. Develop it like a skill. People are different and you won't always agree with them, but we all deserve to get our needs met. And in particular, in the richest country on earth that has boundless funds for mass violence, we can afford to take care of each other. And on a spiritual, emotional, survival of the species level, we can't afford not to take care of each other. In a culture and an empire rooted in eugenics, founded on the idea that you have to fit a certain standard to be able to survive. Empathy is political. I'm not even the first one to make it so. Look at the Nazi himself. He said empathy was a made-up term. He called it weak, and they want you to believe he wasn't a fascist. If they consolidate their power by making you dehumanize each other, don't do that. The end.